The slap landed so suddenly that for a second, I wasn't even sure it had really happened. My glasses flew across the polished mahogany table, skidding onto the carpet, and the sting in my cheek spread like fire. I froze, not because of the pain, but because of the sheer disbelief that the hand that had just struck me belonged to my daughter-in-law. I had imagined many humiliations in my life, but never this. Never being slapped in front of my own family, in front of people who were supposed to respect me. The silence that followed was suffocating. My son stood in the corner, eyes fixed on the floor, refusing to meet mine. My daughter-in-law's voice cut through the air, sharp and merciless. "You are not capable of living alone anymore. It's time for you to be in a nursing home where someone can watch over you." She said it as if she were pronouncing a sentence in court, as if I were already a burden to be disposed of. I wanted to speak, but my throat tightened. The room felt like it was shrinking. Relatives looked away, pretending not to see my humiliation. Some even nodded slightly, as if they agreed with her. And in that crushing moment, one question thundered in my head. How could my own son allow this? How could he let his wife declare me incompetent, like I was nothing but an obstacle standing in the way of their happiness? I picked up my broken glasses with trembling hands. Inside me, a storm was building, but outside, I was the picture of a frail old widow, silenced by shock. They wanted me to sign the papers right there, papers that would transfer me from my home of 40 years into a facility where I would be surrounded by strangers. My daughter-in-law pressed the pen into my hand. Her smile was triumphant, confident that the battle was already won. But she didn't know me. Not really. She didn't know the truth I had hidden for decades. The truth that would make her regret the day she tried to strip me of my dignity. Because while she thought I was nothing more than an aging woman with a modest pension, I was in fact the keeper of a fortune my late husband and I had carefully concealed from the world, and I had guarded it with the same quiet patience I had once used to raise my son. So I sat there, pen in hand, appearing defeated, but inside, my mind was racing. The betrayal burned deeper than the sting on my face. This wasn't just about greed. This was about the people closest to me believing I was disposable. It was about being erased. Erased from my own life by the very family I had devoted myself to. And I asked myself, what does it take for a woman like me, someone who has endured in silence for so long, to finally fight back? That night, as the echoes of laughter and whispered judgment filled the house, I made a promise to myself. They would learn that I was not the weak old woman they imagined. They would discover that every cruel word, every condescending smile, every calculated insult had only pushed me closer to revealing what I had sworn to protect. I can still remember the weight of the phone in my hand as I dialed the number I had promised never to use. My voice trembled, but there was steel underneath when I said, "It's time. Bring the documents. Bring everything. They need to know the truth." When I ended the call, I looked out the window at the city lights. My reflection in the glass was not the image of defeat they expected. It was the face of a woman who had been underestimated for the last time. They thought tonight was the night they stripped me of power. They had no idea tonight was the night I decided to reclaim it. And you, listening to my story, tell me, if you were in my place, betrayed by your own blood, humiliated by the woman who married your son, would you surrender? Or would you unleash the truth that could shatter their perfect little world? Because that's exactly what I chose. I chose not to bow. I chose to fight. And what they will face very soon is a storm they never saw coming. The night after the slap, I couldn't sleep. My cheek still burned, not just from the sting of her hand, but from the humiliation that had settled deep into my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that arrogant little smirk. the satisfaction of a predator who believed she had cornered her prey, and worse than that, my son, standing there, silent as if his mother's pain was none of his concern. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the shadows from the streetlights crawling across the room like silent witnesses. That silence gave me too much time to think, too much time to replay every moment that had led to this night. And then I remembered something, a conversation I had overheard weeks earlier, a conversation that at the time I brushed aside because I didn't want to believe it. I was in the kitchen making tea, the kettle whistling softly when I heard my daughter-in-law's voice in the living room. She was on the phone. I thought maybe she was talking to her mother, but as I moved closer, I caught words that chilled me. Yes, we just need proof. The doctor can sign off that she's no longer capable. Once we have that, it will be easy to get control over her assets. There was a pause, then her voice again, sharp and certain. Don't worry, Ethan will agree. He knows it's the only way forward. I froze with the teacup in my hand. Proof? Control? Assets? She was talking about me. My heart thundered so loudly I was afraid she might hear it through the walls. When I stepped into the living room, she ended the call quickly and flashed that fake smile of hers. "Oh, I was just talking to a friend from yoga," she said, as if I were too old, too gullible to question her. I forced a smile back, but inside, something cracked. That was the first seed of suspicion, but I buried it because it's easier to believe a lie than face the horror of betrayal in your own family. I told myself I had misheard, that she couldn't possibly be plotting against me. But now, after the slap, after the papers she tried to force into my hand, I knew that phone call had been real. She had been planning this for months. The next morning, I decided to test her. I shuffled into the kitchen, letting her see me with my robe wrapped tight and my hair uncombed. I let my hand tremble slightly as I reached for a cup. She watched me carefully, her eyes narrowing the way a hawk watches a rabbit. "Are you all right, Aurora?" she asked sweetly, too sweetly. "You know, if you're feeling weak, maybe it really is time to think about safer living arrangements." I looked straight at her, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, dear, just a little tired." She nodded, but I saw the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. My act had worked. She thought I was slipping, and that meant she would get careless. Later that afternoon, I walked past the study where she had left the door slightly open. Inside, spread across the desk, were brochures from several nursing homes. Their glossy covers showed happy gray-haired couples playing cards, gardens filled with smiling seniors. But to me, the images felt like prisons dressed in pretty colors. I picked up one brochure and saw a name highlighted in yellow. A facility 30 miles away, known for its strict regulations and high monthly fees. Fees that would, of course, be paid with the money from selling my apartment. I placed the brochure back exactly where I found it and slipped quietly away. My heart pounded, but my mind was sharp. Now I had confirmation. This wasn't paranoia. It wasn't my imagination. She wanted me gone. That night, I took out my late husband's journal, the one he had kept locked away for years. He had always written about being cautious, about hiding our wealth for our protection. "Invisible wealth is real freedom," he had written once in neat, firm handwriting. I used to think he was paranoid, but now I understood. If Robert were still alive, he would tell me to be careful, to watch, to wait for the right moment. The days that followed became a performance. I played the role of the frail widow, the woman too distracted to notice the whispers in the corner or the strange phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. But inside, I was collecting every detail. The way my son parroted her words, almost word for word. "Mom, maybe it would be better if you had people around you all the time. What if something happens when you're alone?" His voice was hollow, rehearsed. My heart ached hearing it, because I knew those words didn't come from him. They came from her. I started writing everything down. Dates, times, little comments. Like when she casually asked if I had updated my will, or when she offered to take me to a doctor she trusted for a checkup, her eyes glinting with calculation. I may have looked old and fragile, but my memory was sharp. Every note I wrote became a brick in the wall I was building against them, and yet the hardest part was the loneliness. I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? To the outside world, she was the perfect daughter-in-law, polite, helpful, always smiling. And I was just the aging widow, perhaps a little paranoid, perhaps too sentimental about holding on to an apartment too big for me. That was the mask she wanted everyone to see. One evening, I sat alone on the balcony, the city lights flickering below. My hands trembled as I held my cup of tea, but not from weakness, from rage. I whispered into the night, "You think you can erase me, but you have no idea who you're dealing with." That was the moment I decided to stop being passive. I would not just endure. I would not just watch my life be stolen piece by piece. I would fight, and if it meant revealing the fortune I had sworn to protect, then so be it. But before the storm, there had to be patience. Before the reveal, there had to be proof. And I promised myself I would gather enough evidence to make their betrayal undeniable. When the moment came, I wouldn't just defend myself. I would destroy their lies in front of everyone who had once looked at me with pity. The performance I put on, acting frail, pretending confused, started to bear fruit faster than I expected. My daughter-in-law grew bolder with every passing day. She believed I was softening, ready to surrender. But what she didn't realize was that her arrogance was drawing others into the drama, people she never thought would matter. It began with my neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell. She had lived across the hall for almost 20 years, a sharp-eyed widow with a habit of noticing everything. One afternoon, she knocked softly on my door, her face pale with unease. "Aurora," she whispered as soon as I opened it, "I think you should know something. 2 days ago, I saw your daughter-in-law with a man in a suit. He was holding a clipboard and taking notes in the hallway. They were measuring your front door, your windows, as if they were appraising the place. When they noticed me watching, they left quickly. But Aurora, I'm sure of what I saw." I felt the blood drain from my face. I thanked her quietly, but inside my mind spun, measuring doors, windows. What else could it mean except they were already preparing to sell my apartment? My home, the last place my husband and I had shared together, the place where we had laughed and fought and dreamed. I closed the door behind her, my hands trembling. This was no longer just suspicion. This was evidence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the old family photo album, pictures of Robert holding Ethan as a baby, birthdays celebrated in this very apartment, Christmas trees sparkling in the corner of the same living room they now wanted to strip from me. I whispered to the photographs, "They think this home is just property. They don't understand it is my soul." And then I felt something shift inside me. Pain hardened into resolve. The next day, I decided to test my son. When he came by, I offered him coffee and asked casually, "Ethan, do you know a man named Mr. Price? He was here yesterday with Juliet." His face stiffened. Just a second, barely a flicker, but I saw it. Then he forced a smile. "Mom, you must be mistaken. Juliet's been busy planning the wedding. No one was here." His lie was smooth, but his eyes betrayed him. He knew. He was in on it. I excused myself and went into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the truth sink in. My son, my only child, was conspiring with his wife to take everything from me. The ache in my chest was sharper than any slap, but I would not let it break me. The next morning, as I was watering the plants on my balcony, another unexpected ally appeared. Joseph, a retired lawyer who lived one floor below me, waved and called out, "Aurora, can we talk?" When he came up, his expression was grave. "I don't want to alarm you, but I overheard something disturbing. I was walking past your apartment door last week, and I heard your son speaking with Juliet. He said, "Once she's in the home, it will all be easier. The apartment will sell fast, and we can finally breathe." I gripped the balcony railing until my knuckles turned white. Joseph placed a hand on my shoulder. "I know this is painful, but you must protect yourself. They are not just thinking about this, they are planning it, and they won't stop until they succeed." For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. I nodded, tears threatening but refusing to fall. "Thank you, Joseph. You don't know how much this means to me." He looked at me with kind eyes. "You are not weak, Aurora. Don't let them treat you as if you are." That night, I opened Robert's old safe and pulled out the brown folder he had left me before his death. Inside were copies of bank statements, property deeds, and investment certificates. Proof that the woman they believed to be a penniless widow was, in truth, far from helpless. I traced Robert's handwriting on the labels, his meticulous notes on interest rates and dividends. He had trusted me with this secret, and now it was time to use it. Still, I couldn't move too fast. I needed them to reveal themselves fully, to leave no doubt of their intentions. So I continued to play my part. When Juliet asked me the following week if I had considered visiting one of the nursing homes she had circled in a brochure, I nodded slowly, feigning thoughtfulness. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it would be good to see what they're like." Her eyes gleamed with victory. She had no idea that every word she spoke was sinking her deeper into the trap I was building. Meanwhile, whispers spread. Mrs. Caldwell mentioned to me that Juliet had been asking neighbors if they ever heard me yelling at night or forgetting things. "She's painting a picture," Caldwell warned, "trying to make you look unstable." I thanked her again and added her words to my growing notebook of evidence. Page after page filled with dates, times, names, and the poisonous sentences that were meant to erase me. And then came the breaking point of this round. Late one evening, I walked past the study again and saw a stack of documents on the desk. I couldn't resist. I picked them up with shaking hands and scanned the titles: Power of Attorney, Transfer of Property, Medical Consent Forms. My name printed neatly at the top, waiting for a signature that would never come. I stared at the pages, bile rising in my throat. They had prepared everything. They were ready to strip me of my life with a few strokes of ink. I placed the documents back exactly as I found them, heart pounding, and stepped silently into my room. My reflection in the mirror startled me. I looked tired, older, broken. But then my eyes hardened. "They think they are clever," I whispered to myself. "But I am not done yet. I have secrets they cannot even imagine." And in that moment, as I closed my notebook of evidence and locked the folder of hidden wealth, I knew the stage was being set. They were tightening their net, believing me trapped. But I was weaving a net of my own, and when the time came, theirs would collapse first. By the third week, the mask of kindness my daughter-in-law wore began to slip completely. She no longer bothered to hide her contempt for me. It was subtle at first. Snide remarks dropped in front of relatives, exaggerated sighs when I moved too slowly, little digs about how hard it must be to live all alone at that age. But soon, the poison became more direct, and the cruel game turned public. It happened one Sunday afternoon at a family lunch. I had spent the morning cooking, even though my hands ached, because I wanted to keep alive the traditions Robert and I had cherished. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, an apple pie, the dishes that once made our family feel whole. But when we sat at the table, Juliet wrinkled her nose as if I had placed spoiled food in front of her. "This is what you made?" she said loudly, just enough for everyone to hear. "You really shouldn't be exhausting yourself, Aurora. It's a bit sad, isn't it? An old woman still slaving away in the kitchen. That's not dignity. That's desperation." The words struck harder than a slap. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. I looked at Ethan, praying for him to intervene, to defend me, but he just stared at his plate, chewing silently, as though he had lost his voice. And then Juliet's mother, who had been invited without my knowledge, added fuel to the fire. "She's right, Aurora. You shouldn't be living like this anymore. These meals, this apartment, it's all too much. Don't you think it's time to be somewhere safe? Somewhere where people can take care of you properly?" I felt the eyes of the whole table pressing on me, judging me. My lips trembled, but I forced a smile, trying to keep my dignity intact. "I'm fine," I whispered. "I don't need anyone to take care of me." But my voice was drowned by Juliet's theatrical sigh. She leaned back in her chair, hand on her belly as if she were already pregnant, and said, "Ethan and I are starting a family soon. We need more space. Don't you want your grandson to grow up in a proper home? Don't you think your sacrifice would be worth it?" Sacrifice. That was the word she used, as if stripping me of my home was some noble gesture I owed them. My chest tightened until I could hardly breathe. Tears blurred my vision, and for the first time in many years, I excused myself from the table. Alone in the bathroom, I leaned against the sink, my hands shaking so violently I thought they might snap. I had never felt so cornered, so powerless. That evening, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling. I thought of Robert, of how he would never have allowed our son to become a puppet in the hands of such a woman. I thought of the promises he made me. "Aurora, no matter what happens, protect your dignity. Protect what's ours." I clung to those words as if they were a lifeline. Yet part of me feared that maybe I was losing this battle, that the weight of their schemes was simply too heavy to fight alone. The pressure only grew. Over the next few days, I discovered Juliet had been whispering to relatives behind my back, telling them I was forgetful, unstable, maybe even senile. She planted seeds of doubt with calculated precision. At a cousin's birthday party, I overheard her telling someone, "Aurora left the stove on last week. If Ethan hadn't come by, the whole apartment could have burned down." It was a lie, of course, but by the way the cousin looked at me afterward, with pity in her eyes, I knew the lie had taken root. The humiliation didn't stop there. A few days later, Ethan came to visit me alone. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that he had come to apologize, but instead he sat across from me, hands folded, his face pale and stiff. "Mom," he began, his voice hesitant, "Juliet and I have been talking. We really think it would be better for you to consider options. A residence, maybe, somewhere with professionals. You're not young anymore. What if you fall? What if no one is around?" I stared at him, my own son, repeating her words like a parrot. My heart broke in that moment. The boy I had raised with love and sacrifice, the boy whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose tears I had wiped, was now telling me to give up my life, my independence, my home. "Ethan," I whispered, "how can you even say this to me?" His eyes dropped, shame flickering for a brief second, but then he muttered, "It's for your own good." "For my own good." The phrase rang hollow, dripping with betrayal. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him until he remembered the values I had taught him, but instead I stayed quiet. I knew anger would only fuel their case against me. They wanted me to look irrational, unstable. So I swallowed my pain and nodded as if I understood. Inside, though, something was cracking open, something darker and stronger than the tears I shed that night. One evening, not long after, they staged what I can only describe as an ambush. Juliet invited her parents over again, along with Ethan. They sat me down in the living room, papers spread neatly on the coffee table. "Aurora," Juliet's father began, his deep voice steady but cold, "it's time you made a decision about your future. Living alone at your age is dangerous. It's irresponsible. You could have an accident and no one would know. A nursing home would solve that." Juliet's mother chimed in, her eyes scanning the apartment as though already imagining it as her daughter's property. This place is far too big for one person, and think of all the money you could free up by selling it. Money that could secure your comfort for years." I looked at Ethan, hoping for some sign of resistance, but he only nodded, his eyes downcast. My throat closed, and I whispered, "So that's what this is about? My home?" Silence answered me. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Juliet leaned forward then, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's not just about the apartment, Aurora. It's about you, your well-being. We found a wonderful facility, social activities, medical staff, everything you need. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." She slid a glossy brochure across the table toward me. The image on the cover showed elderly people smiling beneath bright sunlight, but all I saw was a prison. I stared at the papers in front of me, my hands trembling. In that moment, I felt the full weight of their betrayal. My own son sat silently while strangers by blood, told me I was unfit to live in my own home. My knees went weak, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. Juliet's eyes sparkled with triumph. To her, this was the final push, the moment she would finally corner me. But what she didn't know was that my silence was not surrender. My silence was calculation. Every insult, every humiliation, every manipulative word was being etched into my memory, recorded in my notebook, prepared to be used when the time was right. That night after they left, I broke down. For the first time in years, I cried into my pillow, the kind of sobs that shake your entire body. I wasn't just mourning the betrayal of my son. I was mourning the death of the illusions I had held on to for so long. The illusion of family, of loyalty, of love unconditional. That illusion was gone, shattered beyond repair. But once the tears dried, something else remained. A cold, clear determination. They thought they had pushed me to the edge, that I would finally give in. What they didn't realize was that the edge is where the fall ends, and the flight begins. I wasn't going to fall. I was going to rise. The day of the so-called family meeting is burned into my memory like a scar. They chose a Saturday evening, claiming it would be convenient for everyone. But I knew better. It wasn't about convenience. It was strategy. They wanted the whole family gathered as witnesses, to make me feel outnumbered, to pressure me into submission. I prepared tea and set the table, because that's what I had done all my life, even for those who came to wound me. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the cups, but not from weakness, from the weight of what I knew was coming. When the doorbell rang, the storm entered my home. Juliet swept in first, her pristine dress crisp and ironed as if she were arriving at a business negotiation instead of her mother-in-law's living room. Behind her came her parents, faces set with practiced sympathy. And finally, Ethan, my son, who could not even look me in the eye. They sat down, filling the space with a heavy silence. I remained standing for a moment, staring at them, before lowering myself into the armchair across from them. Juliet's father cleared his throat, his deep baritone rehearsed. "Aurora, thank you for seeing us tonight. We know these conversations can be difficult, but they are necessary." His wife nodded solemnly, folding her hands. Then Juliet leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with the confidence of someone certain victory was near. "We've all talked about it, and we believe it's time for you to make responsible decisions about your future. You can't go on living like this. It's dangerous for someone your age." The words sliced through me. My age, my life, my independence, reduced to a problem that needed a solution. I looked at Ethan, hoping against hope, but he only nodded slightly, as if agreeing with their script. My throat tightened, and all I could manage was a whisper. "And what do you suggest?" Juliet smiled thinly, pulling a glossy brochure from her purse. She slid it across the table. "It's a beautiful residence, Aurora. 24-hour medical care, social activities, all meals prepared. You'll never be alone again." She said it as if it were a gift, as if stripping me of my freedom was an act of kindness. I forced my hand to pick up the brochure. The smiling faces on the cover mocked me. Old men playing cards, women knitting in sunny gardens. To anyone else, it might look like paradise. To me, it was a cage dressed in flowers. I set it down and folded my arms. And what about my apartment? The silence that followed told me everything. Juliet's father shifted uncomfortably, then spoke with forced gentleness. Selling the apartment would cover the costs of the residence for many years. It's a wise decision, financially. And of course, there would be money left over. Money that could help Ethan and Juliet start their new life. There it was. The naked truth, finally spoken aloud. It wasn't about my safety. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about money, about turning my home into their lifeline. My heart pounded as rage surged through me. But before I could speak, Ethan leaned forward, his voice stiff, almost robotic. "Mom, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. This is for your own good. If you refuse, we may have to consider other options." Other options. The words froze my blood. It was a threat, veiled but unmistakable. If I didn't agree willingly, they would try to prove me incompetent. My own son, the boy I had raised, now threatening to erase me. I sat back, the room spinning, my vision blurred, my chest tightened, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I might collapse. Juliet's eyes lit with triumph. She reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of documents neatly arranged, each page waiting for my signature. "It's all ready, Aurora. We just need your approval. Sign these papers and everything will be handled. No more stress for you." The pen slid across the table toward me like a dagger. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The whole room held its breath. I could feel their anticipation, their certainty that the battle was over. My son watched me, his jaw clenched, silently demanding obedience. My daughter-in-law leaned closer, whispering just loud enough, "Do it, Aurora. It's the right thing." For a moment, I almost broke. The years of exhaustion, the weight of betrayal, the loneliness, they pressed down on me so hard that signing seemed easier than fighting. My hand hovered over the page, the ink waiting. And then, in the glass cabinet across the room, I caught a reflection. A photograph of Robert and me, taken decades ago, smiling on the balcony of this very apartment, his arm around me, his eyes filled with love and trust. I froze. My hand lowered the pen, and in that instant clarity pierced through the fog. They thought I was broken, but they didn't know the fire still burning inside me. I placed the pen gently on the table and looked up, my eyes sharper than they had been in months. "No," I said simply. The room erupted. Juliet's face flushed with anger. Her father barked, "Aurora, don't be foolish. This is your only chance to secure your future." Her mother muttered something about stubborn old women. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. "Mom, stop this. Why are you being so difficult?" But I remained calm, almost serene. I folded my hands and repeated, "No, I will not sign." My voice was steady, stronger than I expected. Their outrage crashed over me like waves against a rock, but I did not move. Juliet leaned across the table, her voice dropping into a hiss. "You'll regret this, Aurora. Do you really think you can fight us? You're alone. You're old. You're weak." I smiled faintly, a smile she did not understand. "Am I?" I asked softly. And though my heart pounded, though sweat dampened my palms, I knew the tide had begun to turn. Because what they didn't realize was that my refusal tonight was not weakness. It was the first strike. They gathered their papers in frustration, muttering threats under their breath. Ethan avoided my eyes, his face pale. Juliet stormed toward the door, her heels clicking like gunshots against the floor. Before leaving, she turned and spat, "This isn't over. One way or another, you're going to that nursing home." When the door slammed shut, silence filled the apartment. My legs gave out, and I sank into the armchair, trembling. For a long time, I sat there staring at the unsigned papers. My chest still burned with fear, but beneath it, something else had taken root. Resolve. That night, I couldn't sleep. The voices of their threats echoed in my mind, but so did Robert's words. Protect your dignity. Protect what's ours. At dawn, I rose, opened the safe once more, and spread the documents of my secret fortune across the table. The bank statements, the deeds, the investments, all proof that the woman they thought helpless was far from powerless. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had memorized but never used. When the voice on the other end answered, I said firmly, "It's Aurora Hughes. I need your help. Bring everything. It's time." For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight on my chest lift. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was preparing for war. The morning after the ambush, my apartment felt like a battlefield. The papers they had tried to force on me still lay scattered across the coffee table, their blank signature lines glaring at me like open graves. I picked them up one by one, stacked them neatly, and placed them in a drawer. I wanted a reminder of what they had tried to do, a reminder of the line they had crossed. I made myself a cup of tea, but my hands were steady now, not trembling as they had been the night before. As the steam rose, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. For the first time in years, I didn't see a frail widow. I saw a woman sharpening her weapons, preparing to fight, and that fight would not be in shadows anymore. It would be in the open, under lights so bright that not even Juliet's lies could survive. I dialed the number again. Carlos, my financial advisor, answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, professional, but tinged with concern. "Aurora, are you sure you're ready for this?" "I've never been more ready," I replied. "It's time. Bring the documents, the deeds, the statements. Bring everything. If they want war, they'll have it." He was silent for a moment, then said, "You know, once you reveal this, there's no going back. Your family will never see you the same way again." I closed my eyes, remembering the sting of Juliet's slap, the hollow look in Ethan's eyes as he betrayed me. "Good," I said. "That's exactly what I want." We arranged to meet the following afternoon. As I hung up, a strange calmness settled over me. It wasn't joy or relief, it was clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, I had a plan. Later that day, I visited Joseph, the retired lawyer who had warned me of Ethan's words. When he opened the door, he looked at me with concern. "Aurora, you look different." "I am different," I told him, stepping inside. "They think I'm beaten." "Joseph, they think I'm weak. But I need your help to prove otherwise." We sat at his dining table, and I laid out the copies of the documents I had pulled from Robert's safe. His eyes widened as he scanned the figures. Millions in investments, properties across the city, a portfolio that dwarfed anything Ethan and Juliet had ever dreamed of. "Does anyone else know about this?" he asked. "No one," I said. "Not even Ethan. Especially not Ethan." Joseph leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Aurora, this changes everything. They think they're fighting a helpless widow. What they're really up against is a woman who holds all the cards." I nodded. "Exactly. But I don't just want to protect myself, Joseph. I want them to understand the cost of betrayal. I want them to know what it feels like to be stripped of everything they thought was theirs." For the first time, Joseph smiled. "Then let's make sure when the truth comes out, it's in front of as many witnesses as possible." That night, I pulled out my notebook, the one I had filled with every insult, every manipulation, every whisper I had overheard. I organized the entries by date, by name, by place. It wasn't just notes anymore. It was evidence, a weapon. As I wrote, my mind wandered back to Robert. I could almost hear his voice. "Invisible wealth is power, Aurora, but sometimes power must be revealed to remind people who you are." I whispered to the empty room, "Robert, forgive me. I'm about to break our vow of silence. But if you were here, you'd know this is the only way." The next morning, I went to the flower shop where I still worked part-time. My colleagues noticed the change in me. "Aurora, you seem stronger today," one of them remarked. I just smiled faintly. If only they knew, I wasn't just stronger, I was dangerous. That evening, Carlos arrived at my apartment with a leather briefcase. He spread the documents across my dining table. Orders to suspend all financial support I had secretly been providing Ethan, notices of cancellation for the guarantees I had signed, and, most devastating of all, a newly drafted will that redirected every cent of my fortune away from my son and toward charities that protected seniors from abuse. "Are you sure about this?" Carlos asked, his brow furrowed. "This isn't just cutting ties. This is burning bridges." I looked him in the eye. "Carlos, they already set the bridge on fire when they tried to put me in a home against my will. I'm just making sure the flames reach them." He nodded solemnly. "Then let's prepare for the reveal." We discussed the plan late into the night. Timing was everything. It had to happen when their arrogance was at its peak, when they believed they had already won. And then, in front of everyone, the truth would strike like lightning. As Carlos left, Joseph stopped by. He had heard from Mrs. Caldwell, the neighbor, that Juliet was already bragging to others about finally securing the apartment. Joseph laughed bitterly. She has no idea the storm that's coming. I poured him tea, my hands steady, my heart oddly calm. "Let her brag," I said. "The higher she climbs on her lies, the harder she'll fall." That night, I stood at the balcony window, the city lights glittering below. My reflection in the glass stared back at me, a woman reborn. For too long I had allowed myself to be treated like a burden, a shadow. But now I was stepping into the light. I whispered to the night, as if Juliet and Ethan could hear me. "You wanted me gone. You wanted my home, my life, my dignity. But what you'll get is something far different. You'll get the truth, and the truth will destroy everything you've built on your greed." And in that whisper, I felt it fully. The shift from victim to strategist, from prey to hunter. The storm was no longer approaching. I was the storm. The night of our first confrontation came quietly, without warning, like the strike of a snake in tall grass. It was late, past midnight, and the apartment was cloaked in silence. I had been reviewing my notes again, double-checking every date, every word, every insult I had recorded. I told myself I was preparing, but in truth, I couldn't sleep. My body was tired, but my mind was a battlefield where their voices kept colliding with my own resolve. That was when I heard it, the soft creak of a door opening. My ears sharpened, and I held my breath. A faint shuffle of footsteps moved down the hallway, cautious but not cautious enough. I rose from my chair and slipped into the shadows of the living room. The study door opened, and there she was, Juliet. She thought I was asleep. She thought the old widow had finally surrendered to exhaustion. She didn't notice me at first as she crept toward the desk, her silhouette framed by the faint glow of the street lamp outside. Her hand slid into her bag and pulled out a small flashlight. She flicked it on, the beam trembling as she searched through the drawers. I waited, letting her dig, letting her arrogance grow. When she pulled out the brown folder I had deliberately left in plain sight, she gasped quietly. Her fingers fumbled over the edges of the papers, eyes hungry. She began flipping through them, whispering to herself, "Finally, finally." That was when I stepped forward. "Looking for something?" The flashlight beam jerked wildly, landing on my face. She nearly dropped the folder. "Aurora, you scared me. I was just what?" I cut her off, my voice sharper than it had been in years. Checking my desk in the middle of the night, hoping to find proof that I'm losing my mind? Or maybe hoping to find the deeds you want to steal? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then she forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. "You're imagining things. I thought I heard something. I was checking." "Don't lie to me," I snapped. I've let you mock me, insult me, treat me like I was already gone. But this is proof. You can't even wait for me to sign. You want to take it by force." Her face hardened, the pretense falling away. She set the folder back on the desk and straightened, her voice low and venomous. "Fine. You want the truth? Yes, Aurora. I want that apartment. I want the life you're wasting rotting away alone. You don't need it. We do. Ethan and I deserve it. And if you had any decency, you would hand it over." I felt the fury rise in me. But I forced myself to remain calm. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice did not. "Deserve it? You've earned nothing. You married my son, and you think that entitles you to my life, my home, my dignity? You slap me in my own house, humiliate me in front of family, and then break into my study at midnight, and you dare to speak of what you deserve." Her lips curled into a sneer. "You're old, Aurora. You're weak. You don't belong in that apartment anymore. We're doing you a favor, whether you realize it or not." I took a step closer, so close I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "No, Juliet, you're not doing me a favor. You're trying to bury me alive. But let me tell you something. I'm not the one who should be afraid. You are." Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "What can you possibly do? Everyone already thinks you're losing it. We've told them about your forgetfulness, your so-called accidents. They'll believe us, not you." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper, sharp as a knife. "Do you really believe your lies will stand against the truth I'm holding in my hands? You think I haven't been writing everything down? You think I don't have recordings, witnesses, documents you can't even begin to understand?" Her smile faltered. For a moment, I saw fear flicker in her eyes, but she masked it quickly, raising her chin defiantly. "You're bluffing." I stepped back, my voice calm, almost serene. "Am I? Then why are you shaking?" She glanced at her hands and quickly shoved them into her pockets, but the tremor was already there. I turned away, walking toward the door. "Go back to your husband, Juliet. Tell him the game is almost over. Tell him his mother is not the helpless woman he thought she was. Tell him the storm is coming." She didn't move. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, clutching her bag like a lifeline. When I reached the doorway, I turned back one last time. "And Juliet," I added, my voice cutting through the silence, "when this is over, you'll wish you had never laid a hand on me." I left her standing there, pale and speechless, the folder still on the desk. I knew she would run back to Ethan, whispering that I had changed, that I was no longer the frail widow they thought they could crush, and that was exactly what I wanted. Fear, doubt. Let it creep into their perfect little conspiracy. Back in my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding like a drum. I had faced her at last, stripped away the mask, and seen the truth in her eyes. She was not invincible. She was desperate. And desperation makes people reckless. I whispered into the darkness. That was the first battle. The next one will be for everyone to see. The moment of truth came sooner than I expected. It was the wedding reception, the very night Juliet had dreamed of all her life. 130 guests packed into the ballroom, crystal chandeliers glowing above, champagne glasses clinking, laughter rising in waves. To anyone else, it looked like perfection. But beneath the polished surface, I knew the rot was about to be exposed. I sat quietly at a corner table, ignored by most, pitied by a few. Some glanced at me with thin smiles, others avoided my eyes altogether, as if I were already a ghost. Juliet shone in her gown, basking in attention, whispering to her friends with a triumphant smirk. Ethan hovered near her like a shadow, smiling weakly, a man too afraid to face the reflection of what he had become. But I wasn't here to mourn. I was here to finish what I had started. When the music paused for the toast, the ballroom fell into a hush. Juliet stood tall, champagne in hand, ready to thank the guests for celebrating her new beginning. That was when the doors at the back opened and Carlos entered, briefcase in hand. The sight of him made several guests murmur. Everyone in this city knew his reputation. A financial advisor who only appeared in public for matters of great importance. Juliet's smile faltered. Ethan stiffened. I rose slowly from my chair, the crowd parting as Carlos and I walked together to the center of the room. My heart pounded, but my face was calm. For years I had lived in silence. Tonight, silence would end. Juliet hissed across the microphone, "Aurora, what are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself. Sit down before you ruin everything." But I didn't sit. I took the microphone from her trembling hand and turned to face the sea of curious eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady. Carrying across the room, "I apologize for interrupting your evening, but I have been forced into silence for too long. Tonight the truth will be spoken." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Carlos opened his briefcase and handed me the first document. I raised it high. For 3 years, I have secretly paid the debts of my son, Ethan, and his wife, Juliet. Credit cards, rent, even the expenses for this very wedding. Without my support, none of this would exist. A wave of shocked whispers swept through the guests. Juliet lunged forward, grabbing the microphone. "Lies, she's delusional." "Look at her. She's a tired old woman who can barely take care of herself. Don't listen to her." Carlos stepped forward, his voice crisp and authoritative. "The records are here. Transfers totaling over $160,000, all traced to Mrs. Hughes's accounts. If anyone doubts it, the figures can be verified tomorrow morning." Juliet's face drained of color. Ethan muttered, "Mom, please stop this." But I wasn't finished. I turned to my son, my voice trembling with both sorrow and steel. "You stood silent while your wife humiliated me, while she plotted to put me in a home, while she schemed to sell the apartment your father and I built our life in. And you let her. You let her, Ethan, my own son." The room fell silent. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came. His tie hung loose, his hands shook. For the first time, he looked like a little boy again, lost, ashamed, unmasked. Carlos produced the second set of documents. "Effective immediately," he announced. "All financial guarantees provided by Mrs. Hughes are canceled. The apartment lease, the credit cards, the wedding deposit, all terminated. Payment is now the responsibility of Ethan Hughes and Juliet Dawson." The ballroom erupted. Guests whispered, some openly gasping. The manager of the venue stepped forward, his face tight. "If this is true, the balance for tonight's event must be settled before guests leave." His words dropped like a guillotine. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some glancing toward the exit. Juliet shrieked, "You can't do this. You can't just destroy our lives in front of everyone." I met her eyes, my voice cold. "Destroy your lives? I didn't destroy anything. You did. The moment you slapped me in front of my family, the moment you treated me like an obstacle instead of a human being. Tonight isn't destruction, it's justice." I gestured to Carlos, who pulled out the final document, my new will. He handed it to me, and I unfolded it slowly, deliberately, so every eye could follow. "As of tonight," I declared, "everything I own, every property, every investment, every dollar will no longer pass to my son or his wife. Instead, it will go to charities that protect seniors from family abuse. My fortune will never again be used to feed greed." Juliet staggered backward, clutching her gown. Ethan collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. The room buzzed with whispers, shock, and awe. Some guests recorded on their phones, sensing history unfolding. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Juliet screamed, her voice raw. "You can't do this. We're your family. Ethan is your only son." I looked at her, then at Ethan, my voice quiet but carrying across the ballroom. "Family isn't blood. Family is loyalty, respect, love. You showed me none of those, so I owe you nothing." The crowd erupted into applause, not thunderous, but steady, supportive, a wave of recognition that the truth had triumphed. Juliet sank to the floor, sobbing into her hands. Ethan sat motionless, pale as stone. Carlos closed his briefcase. "All documents have been served," he said formally. "The legal effects begin immediately." I handed the microphone back to the stunned master of ceremonies, then turned and walked toward the exit. Each step felt lighter, freer. Behind me, the ballroom was chaos. Guests murmuring, the manager demanding payment, Juliet screaming, Ethan begging silently with his eyes. But none of it touched me anymore. As the doors closed behind me, I exhaled deeply. For the first time in years, I could breathe. My dignity was intact. My truth was known. And those who had tried to bury me would now live under the weight of their own betrayal. That night, as I sat in my quiet apartment, I whispered to Robert's photograph, "I kept my promise. I protected what was ours." And I protected myself. His smiling face in the frame seemed to shine brighter, as if he too approved of the storm I had unleashed. News spreads faster than fire when it's lit in a crowded room. By the next morning, the ballroom confrontation had escaped the four walls where it began and spilled into the city like wildfire. Videos taken on shaky cell phones had already gone viral. Clips of Juliet shrieking, of Ethan's face collapsing under the weight of betrayal, of me standing tall with Carlos at my side, documents in hand like weapons of truth. At first I didn't believe it. Mrs. Caldwell knocked on my door at dawn, breathless with excitement, her phone clutched tightly. "Aurora, you're everywhere. Look." She showed me a video posted online, my voice echoing through the ballroom. "Family isn't blood. Family is loyalty, respect, love. You showed me none of those, so I owe you nothing." Thousands of comments poured beneath it. Some were outraged at Juliet. Some praised my courage. Some even shared their own stories of being betrayed by those closest to them. I felt my knees weaken, not from fear, but from the strange weight of recognition. For years, I had lived in shadows, invisible, mocked. Now strangers called me a symbol of dignity. It was surreal. But the fire didn't stop at the internet. By afternoon, Joseph came upstairs with his face flushed from walking the block. "They're talking about you everywhere, Aurora. At the cafe, at the newsstand. People are calling you the widow who fought back. You've become legendary." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but when I turned on the television and saw a news anchor replaying the viral clips, my heart understood. What had begun as a personal humiliation had become a public reckoning. The witnesses from the wedding began to choose sides. Some who had watched silently that night now reached out, ashamed of their cowardice. A cousin called me in tears, confessing she had believed Juliet's lies about me being forgetful, unstable. But when I saw the video, Aurora, I realized the truth. I'm so sorry. Others, however, clung to denial. Juliet's parents issued a statement insisting I had manipulated the situation, painting me as a cruel old woman punishing her son. But their words rang hollow against the footage of Juliet slapping me, of Ethan parroting her demands, of me standing resolute with proof in my hands. The truth was too bright to be shadowed by their lies. Even strangers became witnesses. One of the waiters from the ballroom messaged me through Mrs. Caldwell. He said he had overheard Juliet bragging weeks before the wedding about how she would finally get rid of the old woman and take the apartment. He offered to testify if needed. Another guest uploaded her own recording, capturing Ethan saying, "Once she's in the home, we'll finally breathe." Each piece of evidence was like gasoline on the fire, burning away their facade. For Juliet and Ethan, the fallout was immediate. The ballroom demanded payment in full. Creditors began calling. Their carefully crafted image of a young power couple collapsed in hours. And everywhere they turned, there were whispers, stares, people pointing. The very community they had tried to impress now mocked them, pitied them, shunned them. But for me, something unexpected happened. People began knocking on my door, not reporters or gawkers, but neighbors, old friends, even strangers who had seen the videos. They came with stories of daughters who had stolen savings, of sons who had pressured their parents into selling homes, of grandchildren who saw their elders as burdens. My living room became a place of confession, of solidarity. I listened, I comforted, and I realized my story was not just mine. It belonged to all of us who had been silenced by betrayal. One evening, as the sun set over the city, I stood on my balcony with Joseph at my side. He looked out at the horizon and said quietly, "Aurora, you've lit something that can't be put out. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is a movement." I thought of Robert, of his warnings about greed and appearances. He had been right. Visible wealth attracts problems. But invisible wealth, revealed at the right time, had become a weapon not just for me, but for others who needed a voice. That night, I wrote in my notebook one final line beneath the pages of insults and lies. The truth has spread, and once fire spreads, it cannot be contained. The days that followed were a storm for Ethan and Juliet, but for me, they were strangely calm. I woke each morning to sunlight on my balcony, made tea in my chipped porcelain cup, and watered the plants Robert and I had once tended together. The world outside was chaos, but inside my apartment, there was finally peace. Juliet's downfall was swift. The ballroom filed suit within 48 hours, demanding the unpaid balance of the wedding. Creditors called relentlessly, each demand sharper than the last. Her image consulting business, once her pride, evaporated overnight. Who would trust a woman now infamous for slapping her mother-in-law and trying to steal her home? Clients fled. Colleagues whispered. She became a walking scandal. Ethan fared no better. His employer, embarrassed by the viral videos, quietly let him go. The man who once boasted of building a future now faced the wreckage of his own choices. I heard from Joseph that they were evicted from their apartment within a month, forced to move back into Juliet's parents' crowded home. From the windows of my own apartment, I sometimes imagined them there, living in the shadow of their own shame, surrounded not by luxury, but by silence and blame. And the community? They turned their backs. Where once Juliet had preened at family gatherings, now she was shunned. Relatives avoided her calls. Friends whispered about her betrayal. Even those who had doubted me at first now crossed the street to avoid being associated with her disgrace. The fire had consumed her carefully built reputation, leaving nothing but ashes. As for me, vindication arrived quietly, like a gentle tide. Neighbors brought me flowers. Strangers mailed letters thanking me for speaking aloud what so many endured in silence. The local paper called me a voice for dignity, while television anchors debated what my story revealed about generational greed. For the first time in years, I was not pitied or dismissed. I was respected. But the greatest victory was not the applause. It was the silence. The silence of nights without whispered threats. The silence of mornings without condescending remarks. The silence of finally being free from the constant erosion of my worth. One evening, sitting with Joseph on the balcony, he asked me softly, "Do you ever regret it? Revealing everything? Burning the bridge with your son?" I looked out at the city lights, my hands wrapped around my teacup. "I regret losing the boy I raised," I admitted. "But I don't regret standing up to the man he became." I paused, then added, "Sometimes to save yourself, you must be willing to lose what you love most. It's the hardest truth, but also the clearest." The aftermath was not just punishment for them, it was rebirth for me. The woman they tried to erase had risen stronger, sharper, unshakable. My dignity had been restored, and in its place grew something even larger, purpose. I had survived the storm. They were buried by it. 2 months after that night in the ballroom, I sat once again on my balcony. The same place where so many tears had fallen, the same balcony where Robert and I once dreamed about our future. But this time, the air felt different. The silence wasn't heavy with humiliation or fear. It was clean, sharp, almost holy. I was no longer the frail widow they thought they could erase. I was Aurora Hughes, and my dignity was intact. The city had already moved on to new scandals, new rumors, but my story lingered like smoke after a fire. Strangers still stopped me in the market to whisper, "You were brave," or "You gave me hope." They weren't praising me for my fortune or my defiance alone. They were praising the act of standing, of refusing to bow when family had turned into predators. Sometimes I still ask myself, was it worth it? Losing my son, watching his face collapse under the weight of my rejection, hearing him beg and knowing I couldn't answer? The answer is never easy. I miss the child he was, the boy who once clung to my hand and promised he would always protect me. But I cannot miss the man he became, the man who conspired to throw his own mother away like an old coat. Love doesn't mean submission. Love doesn't mean silence in the face of betrayal. Love, real love, is respect. And when that respect dies, what remains is not family, but chains. Juliet never contacted me again. Pride is a powerful prison. Ethan tried once, leaving a voicemail thick with tears. "Mom, please, just talk to me. We can fix this." But I didn't call back. Some bridges, once burned, must stay ash. If he wants redemption, he'll have to find it on his own. And me? I found my own redemption not in revenge, but in the peace that followed. I turned the pain into purpose. I donated part of my fortune to organizations fighting elder abuse. I began speaking quietly at community centers, telling seniors, "You are not disposable. You have the right to dignity, to safety, to respect." Every time I saw their eyes light up with recognition, I knew my story had meaning beyond the ruins of my family. That is my closure. Not reconciliation, but rebirth. Not silence, but a voice that carries farther than I ever imagined. So now I ask you, listening to my story, if the people closest to you turned against you, if they tried to strip you of your life and your dignity, would you surrender? Or would you stand, even if it meant standing alone? Because standing alone, I discovered, is better than bowing together in chains. This is not just my story. It is a warning, a lesson, and perhaps for someone listening right now, it is a mirror. If it is, I want you to remember, your age does not make you powerless. Your silence does not make you invisible, and your dignity is worth more than any fortune in the world. I have learned that true love is not measured by words, but by respect. I have learned that sometimes the greatest act of love you can give yourself is to walk away. And I have learned that even when blood betrays you, there is a family waiting in unexpected places, neighbors, friends, even strangers who see your worth when your own kin do not. My name is Aurora Hughes, and this was the story of how I lost everything I thought I had and gained something greater than I ever imagined, myself. Did you like my story? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe dignity is worth fighting for, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story, because no one, no matter their age, should ever be treated as if they are disposable.